That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Coup! Which premiered at the 2023 Venice Film Festival. It's co-directed by Joseph Schuman, making his directorial debut, and Austin Stark, who's making his third feature, and both of them wrote it together.
Nice. The other director, what have they done?
I'm pretty sure I made you watch his debut, The Runner, which was that BP oil spill sex scandal movie with Nicolas Cage, and also The God Committee, which I remember seeing out of the Tribeca Film Festival with Kelsey Grammer, Julia Stiles, and Colman Domingo.
What is Coup about? During the Spanish flu of 1918, a mischievous cook rebels against his wealthy employer. What's your pull quote?
A withering critique on fake liberalism and capitalism's casualties, Coup finds Peter Sarsgaard in top form as a sexy, sinister interloper out for his just desserts.
Mine. Magnussen and Sarsgaard shine in this slick and satisfying dark comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I like this movie.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Billy's my friend. And I like Peter, too. But yeah, I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, I didn't either. I mean, so, you know, we're going back to the Spanish influenza of 1918, which, of course, was heavily referenced during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's kind of perfect timing to revisit some similarities.
So the story is that Magnussen and his family, which consists of his wife, played by
Sarah Gadon,
and his two children, they live in this grand estate. They're like off some island in New England somewhere that they're calling
it Egg Island. So they've gone there to isolate, which there is an Egg Island off in the Bahamas, but this would be off upstate New York. So I'm assuming, since his name is Jay Horton, this is also a reference to Jay Gatsby, who lived in West Egg in The Great Gatsby.
Oh, sure. So this family lives in this grand manor estate, and they have staff like butler, housekeeper, nanny,
Chauffeur.
all that. Mm-hmm. And they all live in a like staff quarters, so like a guest house off the property. Mm-hmm. And one day, Billy tells his wife, "Oh, I hired a new cook, so he should be on his way." The opening of the film is we see a dead body with Peter Sarsgaard over it, and as the audience, we assume he's responsible. And then we see him take that person's identification. This person's name is Floyd Monk, and then we see him pop up at Billy's house. Like, I'm the new cook, Floyd Monk. So immediately we know something's not right. But he slowly makes he sort of corrupts the staff. Mm-hmm. But the main person in his way is, I don't even know how you'd refer to her, like the manager of the house?
Kind of the head of the house, yeah. Kristine Nielsen, who is Billy Magnussen's co-star from Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike, who is giving me Veronica Cartwright vibes in this.
Well, in this film, she's been with Billy's family for a long time. She raised him, and she's very strict. There are a lot of rules. She does not like Peter's character because he doesn't want to follow the rules. So what does Peter do? Get rid of her ass by poisoning her. Mm-hmm. But of course, because it's during the Spanish flu, they think that that lady is sick, so they isolate her. So while she's out of the picture, Peter corrupts the staff, which amounts to them asking if they can live in the house, because all of these adult staff members are living in these small quarters under one roof. It's not comfortable when there's this huge mansion where they could effectively each have their own room. Mm-hmm. So they convince Billy, you need to let us move in here. We get to eat what we want and eat at the main dining room table, and you're going to double our pay. Mm-hmm. And to make matters worse, the wife, she takes a liking to Peter. Because like you said, he's kind of sexy in that way that's like he's kind of a rebel, and he clearly is more of an assertive man, whereas Billy seems like, while he's a nice looking man, he's also kind of like a lump of pudding.
He's kind of useless and a liar, which we need to get into. But food ends up being kind of the main
currency.
The dramatic catalyst as well.
Well, let's talk about the food, because Billy doesn't want to eat animals
of any kind.
Of any kind.
Not even fish.
But when Peter comes along, he's like, well, I mean, just because y'all don't want to eat meat, how come we can't eat meat? And then because there's a supply chain issue due to the Spanish flu, they can't even get food into the house. So then it becomes that Peter is like the hunter-gatherer.
Yeah.
He's out here shooting deer and preparing food, which is a little more complex than that because initially he lets the family think Billy's collecting food. But when the wife realizes that Peter is the one who's taking care of her family, she takes a liking to him. They end up having a little bit of an affair.
Yeah, I thought an alternative title could be One Flew Over the Cuckold's Nest.
But getting back to what you mentioned, Billy's a liar because he's a writer. He writes like political stuff. He's quite popular. And his main thing is advocating for workers, which is ironic because he has staff members in his home and he doesn't treat them equally.
And railing against Woodrow Wilson's response to the pandemic.
But everything blows up because Billy gets an opportunity to be the cover boy for a magazine called McClure. And when the magazine comes out, there's a picture. Of course, Billy's picture's on the cover, but the headline or the title of the magazine says The Face of Fraud. Because someone has tipped off the magazine, someone being Peter, of course, that the articles he writes talking about how he's like with the protesters and seeing things firsthand, that's all a lie. Billy's cooped up on Egg Island, and all the information he gets, he's paying people to like funnel him details.
Fake news. He's also corresponding with Upton Sinclair, the writer of The Jungle, which is one of the controversial classics about workers' rights that got everyone in an uproar. And he's played in a brief role by Fisher Stevens, who calls Billy Magnussen. And you can already tell by then that Upton Sinclair is onto him by the questions he's asking.
So everything falls apart because, well, it's kind of two parts. One, Billy gets sick, so he's isolated to the staff quarters. But before that happened, he rummaged through Peter's stuff because he suspects Peter's responsible for his downfall. And he finds the ID of Floyd Monk, the dead man, and realizes that there's a murderer living in my house. He confronts Peter, and Peter tells him the truth, which is that man, Floyd Monk, that cook, he had worked his entire life to save up enough money to buy a bar. But because of Billy's writings and his propaganda to basically like shut down during the pandemic, that man lost his business and he committed suicide. And Peter even has a suicide note. So Billy then realizes that Peter's not a killer and that maybe his writings, you know, had a more negative effect than he imagined. But Billy ends up shooting and killing Peter and convincing the police that, yep, he was a murderer and he was in my house. And so then we flash forward a bit and we see that everything's back to normal. Billy is now like a hero because he's all over the newspapers as like this writer who captured a murderer.
Saved his family, which reminds me of the actor that just did something like that in...
Who lives down the street from us? Anyway.
Jonathan...
Yeah, the one who was running around barefoot.
From the deep end?
Yes. The final shot is that the wife finds the suicide note of this Floyd Monk man and realizes that Peter was innocent. But then Billy tells her, well, who cares because we're back. And that lady goes, yeah, we're back.
She quietly goes and sits down at the end of her table and says, yeah, we're back.
I think the story's really slick. A lot of the writing, it's quite funny. Peter Sarsgaard and Billy Magnussen, I thought, were really good together. And
I thought Sarah Gadon was quite good as well.
She was. I did like her. And even the staff, I thought they were cute.
Oh, yeah. Skye P. Marshall is Mrs. Tidwell, who we know she was in a supporting role in A Lot of Nothing. She has a few fun moments as well.
She does. So overall, I thought it was really well done. Probably my biggest weakness is, the biggest weakness is I think that it loses a little bit of steam in the third act. Specifically because as the audience, I had forgotten that it was made to seem like Peter had killed someone. Because no one's really checking for any of that. And in the beginning, it would seem that Billy and the lady who runs the house are suspicious of Peter. And then that all kind of falls to the wayside. Maybe because there's a lot going on. And then we finally do pick it back up. Everything escalates very quickly. But the movie has a quick running time, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I think it felt pretty slick to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree that maybe at the top of the third act, it kind of feels like, okay, where are we going with this? But I think everybody who's played their parts quite well. Kristine Nielsen also, that had kind of like Helen Mirren in Gosford Park, like very rigid and sticking to it. And it's like, oh, okay, you drank too much of the Kool-Aid, girl. But what I do like at the end, after Sarsgaard's been dispatched, is Faran Tahir, who's playing Kaan, and Skye P. Marshall's Mrs. Tidwell. We see them leaving the estate because as things have gone back to normal, they're refusing to resume receiving the same treatment.
But it's an interesting dynamic because I also think because someone says you're either.
That's what her last line, I think, is Mrs. Tidwell is like, you're either
a servant or you're being served.
Right.
And it's kind of and the reason she says that is because they're going around telling stories like the servants when they're all in their quarters alone. Kaan is saying that he moved to this country because he thought the streets would be paved with gold, but sadly he realized the hard way that they're not. And the other lady,
Kristine Nielsen,
the black lady.
Oh, Mrs. Tidwell.
Miss Tidwell. She explains that her goal was to go to medical school. And they basically laugh at her. Like, girl, ain't no way. Even the main lady says, yeah, Billy was going to write her a letter of recommendation, but we know that's not going to help. She's not going to get into medical school. But I thought it played with all that in an interesting way because the fact that what I found interesting is Peter, this guy comes in and disrupts the system, which a lot of people do. They want to shake you out of something, but it's what else are they going to do? You want me to quit my job and stop following the status quo and checking the boxes, but then where will that leave me?
Well, there's no support system.
There's no support system for me to do that, so...
Which is why the Sarah Gadon character, Julie Horton, is interesting, because the woman, specifically a heterosexual white woman, is too close to benefiting from the power structure that's in place. So why... she's the most frustrating part, because it's you realize what her true nature is, and what she's sacrificing to remain part of the status quo that benefits her.
But then what else would she do?
Well,
she has children. She's accustomed to a certain lifestyle. What is she going to do? Run off with Peter and just live in a tree?
Right. But as you expect people to be able to make more sacrifices as support systems are there for them, in the ensuing decades. But I agree. What else is a woman like that going to do then? But clearly we see that exact same behavior playing out now.
So we find out that Billy is claiming that the irony that, because the point's made several times that Billy plans on donating his estate to the public, but then while he has it, he doesn't want the staff to use it. Mm-hmm. So it's funny that the people who are in close proximity to him can't use his estate, but then we're supposed to believe that he's just going to donate it to the public because he doesn't want them. They're not allowed to and his character's presented as a really nice guy.
But it's fake.
In comparison to how these people could be treated.
Sure.
But then the reality is, you don't want them eating with you. You don't want them He has a beautiful indoor pool that he doesn't want anyone to use.
But it's all lip service because, we don't call them servants, we call them staff. Okay.
Okay, but they all have to sleep under one roof in this house far away from the nice house.
Like sardines. And you don't want them in the drawing room or taking baths in the house in the morning.
We know things are really going to go left because the staff, after they've gotten rid of the older lady, they're all sitting in the house, drinking Billy's liquor, gambling. And then the wife shows up.
Mm-hmm. With a glass of milk.
With a glass of milk and her nightgown on. And at first you think she's going to be a little funky. But then she's like, I want to play. So now she's enjoying her time with the staff. And then Billy walks in. And he's mad. Mm-hmm. And the wife goes, well, I gave them permission to do this, and then he kind of walks away. I liked Billy's character because, again, relatively speaking, he comes across as nice, but I think that he's someone who's in a position out of luck.
Oh, yeah.
And has a lot of fear that it will be taken away from him. But I also got the sense that he's not a monster.
He's not a monster, but he's spineless. And what I think what such extreme privilege can do, it does that for you, which is of course exemplified in and leads him to murder because he can't control his emotions. But their garden is robbed, so the stores are closed down, and Sarsgaard's like, the vegetables in the garden aren't going to last long. And that very night, they are plundered, and Billy Magnussen, goes down to stop them, and they laugh in that man's face.
And he recognizes the people robbing him and still is like such a pushover.
Yep.
But again, I think a lot of people are like that, you know? So it's funny how like a story said 100 years ago feels so relevant today. Right. The scene where the wife has sex with Peter, that was interesting.
Yeah,
that's the part of the film where I think everything just escalates so quickly.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get a sense of how long these people were isolated, because Billy's refusing to eat meat and they don't have much food. So we just see him eating rice. And it's made to seem like he's been subsisting off of rice for a while, but he's also pretty thickum. So it's like, if that's true, you're not losing weight. But then he gets sick, and there's a cool scene where Peter goes in to kind of get his ass together and throws him a chunk of meat, and Billy finally does eat it. Mm-hmm. But then, and the power has also been turned off. And this is at the end of the film, where Billy finally goes to eat the meat because he's starving, and then the power comes back on. So the lights come on, and he can see himself in the mirror, like eating this meat that he's so against.
Reduced to a carnivore. And I like how that's juxtaposed, because the lights also go on in the main house, and that's where Sarsgaard and Sarah Gadon are getting it on. It's like, oh, now that the lights are on, we kind of have to examine where our behavior has brought us,
right,
and the choices we made. And also in the final shot, Billy Magnussen's character is no longer a vegetarian.
Well, and I thought him eating that meat and then seeing himself, and then ultimately that leads to him killing Peter. I feel like a lot of people probably can relate to the experience of being forced to push yourself beyond, and then you see yourself in a new light, good or bad. Like you cross that line where you can't return, and so you alter your character. Because also, not only when we flash forward to see that things are like, we're back and things are good, but we also see that Billy's going to run for governor. Yeah. Off the shine of all the praise he's getting for catching and killing a murderer. So it's interesting how people get a quick, like they evolve very quickly.
Oh yeah. Sarsgaard has a particularly poetic line about talking to Sarah Gadon about how trying, like exceptional times like these, like, you know, in isolation during a pandemic, it either brings out the beauty or the beast in people, which is, I also think, what this film is exemplifying. But
I like the, I'm assuming they didn't have a lot to work with production-wise, but I like the cinematography and the production design, because we're stuck in this big estate. And so it's pretty... It doesn't feel as claustrophobic as you would think, considering this family's in isolation. So I thought it was well handled.
I agree. It was shot by Conor Murphy, cinematographer who we've reviewed several films they've shot, including Mickey and the Bear and Susie Searches more recently. But yeah, I like how it looked. I think the score was good by Nathan Halpern, who's also provided scores for a lot of excellent indie films, including The Rider and Swallow. But yeah, I had missed this at Venice, where Sarsgaard was in 3 films. He won Best Actor at that festival for Memory, opposite Jessica Chastain.
We reviewed that.
We did, yeah, and he's also excellent in that. So I don't know, I think if you like anybody in this, because it's getting a very small, limited release, this is a film that's worth seeking out.
What would you give Coup?
3.5.
I thought it was very good. I would give it 3.5 out of 5. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.